The Liberals and the NDP are both gathering for caucus meetings this week amid a new reality after the NDP ended their supply and confidence agreement with the Liberals. I spoke with NDP House Leader Peter Julian about that decision. Peter Julian, thank you for making the time. Appreciate it.
Good to be with you.
Obviously, your leader has said that your party, the NDP, got what you needed out of the deal, so it's okay to move on. Tell me, do you think you got enough out of the deal for yourselves as a party and for Canadians?
Well, it's not about us. It's about Canadians. 500,000 Canadians have already had access to the NDP's dental care program. And you'll remember, of course, the NDP had to push and prod and drag Liberals to actually getting to this point. It's now an enormous success. Pharmacare is through the House. The anti-scab legislation has been adopted. The budget provisions around affordable housing that the NDP insisted on is all in place. But now we look at what Canadians need moving forward. And the reality is Mr. Trudeau and the Liberals are beholden to corporate interests. So the things that need to happen now is for example, combating food price gouging. When Canadians go to the supermarket, they're paying far too much. And the companies, the few companies that we have, are gouging them. Gas price gouging, telecom gouging, these are all things that take money from Canadians. We also see with the overseas tax havens, the massive amount of money that goes overseas. So the Liberals are beholden to corporate interests, much like Pierre Poilievre. They don't want to change the dynamic. Jagmeet Singh and the NDP want to put in place measures that actually continue to help Canadians.
Okay,
and that means standing up to these corporate CEOs.
But you've pointed to a number of things that the NDP views as a success for Canadians, dental care and the other things you listed there. So why is leaving the deal the answer? Why couldn't you try and exert more pressure on the government to try and get them to move on those other issues that you just pointed to?
We've been working for 2 years, Rosemary. We've been pushing hard for 2 years. We know that Liberals are just far too beholden to corporate interests in order to move in those areas. We managed to push and prod to get a number of important things that help Canadians. But the reality is the Liberals simply are too beholden to corporate interests to make the changes that Canadians need.
Okay.
And the reality is, I think it's fair to say, as Jagmeet Singh mentioned, far too weak to combat the Poilievre agenda, which is to cut and rip apart everything that is being built up to actually help Canadians.
And I'll push you a little bit on the Poilievre stuff in just a moment, but just going back to pharmacare, for instance, which, as you point out, is through the House but not the Senate. As House Leader, do you commit to allowing that to finish it off, to getting that across the finish line? Is that still important for the NDP?
The Senate will be examining it in the coming weeks. They'll be adopting it. The provinces have already expressed interest. British Columbia, Manitoba, two great examples. That is in place. Now, one thing I do want to mention, though, that
well, it's not in place because it hasn't passed Parliament. So I'm just making sure that your support for that continues.
Yes, of course. I mean, we're the instigators. We're the ones that got it to that point. But it's an important question that you ask because. What it does once you get the Royals' assent is it starts a one-year ticker that basically leads us to the expert panel that makes recommendations about the next stage of pharmacare and as well the bulk purchasing policy. At this point, we need to make sure, and that's why the NDP will be running to form government, that next stage of pharmacare actually happens. And that is going to be an important part of the next year and a half.
Okay, I think there is some confusion amongst Canadians, so I'll try and get you to explain it to them. Between you saying we can't support the government anymore because we got some things but we didn't get as far as we wanted, and then on the other hand saying we are not prepared to bring down the government yet. What are Canadians supposed to make of the contradiction? It's sort of like having your cake and eating it too. Like either you don't believe in them or you believe in them maybe. Like where are you in that conversation then?
Where we're at is we have said we're going to be proceeding vote by vote, and we did that under COVID, and Canadians benefited. I mean, the NDP are, in very many respects, influenced, pushed, and put into place many of the measures that got people through COVID, and that was on a vote-by-vote basis. We negotiated each vote. As far as confidence is concerned, confidence is always on the table. We are going to act in the best interests of Canadians, but we are no longer bound by the confidence and supply supply agreement,
Right.
which meant that, of course, we would be voting confidence on those motions.
Will you, as House Leader, try and find other points of leverage when those votes come up, so that you can see if you can extract other things that, of course, aren't part of a formal deal, but things that you might be able to get from the government?
I think it's fair to say, as we did during COVID, we'll be looking at making sure that Canadians are getting the support they need. And under COVID, what that meant was for every vote, we negotiated what we thought was in the best interests of Canadians. That meant often extending or strengthening these provisions around COVID. It also meant new programs as well to support small businesses and people with disabilities and seniors. So we'll be proceeding in the same way we did under COVID, vote by vote.
Tell me, I understand that there were some initial conversations around this as far back as June. And certainly members of caucus that I've spoken to or been in touch with say that they were starting to lose interest in the deal, starting to no longer see the benefit of it. What would you say is the percentage of caucus that was done with what you had done with the Liberal government?
Well, I think we've been discussing it all the way along. I mean, our caucus meets every week. We have updates on the agreement and the negotiations. They were long, far longer than they needed to be, quite frankly. There are a number of measures that the Liberals could have just, in good faith, put into place rather than these protracted negotiations. But I think it's fair to say members of caucus understood we've sort of hit this limit in what Liberals are prepared to do. And that's why they're being as beholden as they are to corporate interests. They're not prepared to take action on food price gouging and gas price gouging and all of these other things that actually take a strong prime minister and a strong cabinet to take action on. We can't have voluntary measures. We need to make sure Canadians are being taken care of, and that it's very clear to us is not something that interests the Liberal government at this time.
If you are positioning yourselves, and it seems that you are, given what we've heard from Mr. Singh, as the alternative to Pierre Poilievre, as a potential government in waiting, I would imagine it's pretty critical that you win those two by-elections, particularly the one in Winnipeg. And if you can't do that, isn't that evidence that you are, in fact, not a viable alternative?
Well, first off, we're a very viable alternative when you look at two aspects of the polling. First, that the highest approval rating in the country is for Jagmeet Singh as a national political leader. Mr. Trudeau has fallen. We've seen that in repeated polls. And Mr. Poilievre's support has been softening, and the number of Canadians who don't approve his actions has been steadily increasing.
If you're a viable, I mean, those are encouraging things for you, Mr. Julian, but you've been around a long time. To be a viable alternative, you have to actually win the seats, not just be popular.
Absolutely. The other point that I want to raise, of course, is that we have the broadest universe in terms of first and second choices. The New Democrats are at the same kind of level we had back in 2011. About 50% of Canadians are looking at us the first or second choice, and that's something that is far beyond the two other parties. So those are encouraging things.
That's fine, but go back to my point, which is specifically about the by-elections. If you don't at least hold the seat in Winnipeg, is that not a sign that you're actually not the ones to take down Pierre Poilievre if he were to form government?
First off, it's very encouraging what we're seeing with by-elections, but you'll also remember with Winnipeg North, we lost that by-election under Jack Layton just a few weeks before we had the breakthrough and became official opposition. So I think by-elections are important, and we're certainly seeing the strength of the support. But in answer to your question, I think Winnipeg North is one good example of a by-election that didn't in any way impede the overall trend, which is increasing support for the NDP across the country.
Okay, you're going to have a busy fall, Mr. Julian. Please come back. Thanks for your time.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Great to speak to you. Thanks so much.